welcome to the first episode of Builds with Brian. I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos out there and thought I was sitting in the couch watching all of these people doing things that I did. Thought it would be a fun idea if we got some of my projects. As my son Luke laughs at me while I'm talking. So this channel will be a little bit different. It's not going to be all about boats. It's not going to be all about houses. It's going to be a little bit of everything. We do work on skateboards and around the house and on the boats and sort of anything that I'm working on. And I will say that I am not an expert at any of it, and I try to use the tools that I have and the skills that I have, and sometimes I rush and sometimes I go fast and sometimes it comes out pretty good. So it should be a lot of fun. One of the things I'm working on now is the boat project, which you can see behind me. This is a 16-foot San Juan dory. We are about a year into the project, so we have a couple other videos that we took before we thought we were going to do the channel, and also some photos that we'll compile together so you can take a look at it. So we'll sort of bring you up to speed on where we are, and then hopefully we'll do a better job of taking some video as we go on. We're going to continue to work on the San Juan dory today, and I wanted to bring you up to speed from the last couple of times I've had. I put together a couple segments of video and pictures to show you the last 12 months of the build, and did fairly well. Went through the framing project and built up, put the plywood on it. And one of the things that I missed and would have liked to see better, because there's not much out there, is putting the fiberglass on the boat. I had a really tough time with that, and today we're going to start the sanding to get it a little bit better. One of the things that I did that I would regret is I put these ribs on before I had wrapped it with the fiberglass, because I didn't have the fiberglass and I was sort of excited to put the ribs on, and then I tried to put the fiberglass over it and just had a tougher time. I think it also is related to working in a garage in New Hampshire at below temperatures, so had a lot of bubbling. Since then, which you guys can't see, but specifically on the white oak ribs, there was a lot of bubbles, and I believe it might have been a little bit related to the off-gassing from the white oak that I've been warned about. But what happened was the plywood was fine, which is a Marine plywood. It's fine, but anything with a white oak, we had a lot of bubbles, we had a lot of areas. So what I did is I went through, and I'm looking for one that I can show you, like right here, and I marked it all, and then I got my Dremel tool, and then with the Dremel tool I cut everything out, and then I filled it in the series, and you can see there's one right there that shows there's a little bubble. Now I did a lot of sanding, and so I was sort of happy with not being absolutely perfect, because I'm going to paint the boat and I think it'll seal just fine. But anyway, it was a lot of steps back, but we're finally feeling like I've gotten it into pretty good shape where we can just start putting some coats. And what I've done is I've got a layer of fiberglass cloth on the bottom of the boat with probably 3 or 4 layers of epoxy over it. I'm using the West System epoxy. And now on the sides, I've gone to wrapping the corners with the fiberglass. So everywhere there's a corner and a seam together is wrapped in the fiberglass. And then I'm just going to coat multiple layers of epoxy on top of it. So this is the first layer on the sides with the epoxy. And now what I'm going to be doing is going and sanding it. And I've gone through a bunch of techniques where I've used power sanders, I've used a lot of other things, and it does fast work, but then I end up taking off too much and then I start all over again. So what I decided to do is we made this little jig where I glue some sandpaper on, and I'm literally just going to sand through and knock off some of the high spots, because I want to build up as much as I can and not take too much off. So that's the process that we're going to go through now, is I'm going to put this on. I also have a wire brush, which is around here somewhere, that you'll see me using, that when this gets built up too much, I'm going to knock off some of the contents built within the sandpaper. I'm going to knock it off with the brush. So labor intensive, not very exciting, but hopefully when I get this layer, when the weather warms up a little bit, we'll get on the next layer of fiberglass. So my hope here is we're about mid-February right now, so I'm hoping to get this project moved along so that we can put it in the water in late spring, early summer. So here we go. I'm going to start doing some sanding and just using this to rub against the boat, and you'll see, like right here, there's some high spots here that is just from dripping and so forth. So I'm going to try to just keep knocking that off until I get it built down. This is about one of my least favorite things to do on this whole project, is to just sand by hand. I find it very boring. And one of those things that I wish I could just go to, sleep the next morning and someone would have done it for me the night before. So it's just sort of one of those things, and I'm hoping that at the end of it, this boat is going to be painted. I'm thinking about a 2-part epoxy, probably a hunter green color, something like that. I'm not super critical about worried about getting a varnish job, a perfect varnish job, but just so it's smooth and it looks good. And it floats. So that's the most important thing. So what I'm doing here is you'll see that there's some ridges there from the drifts again, and I'm just trying to work it just to flatten those out. And I don't have to go 100% flat this time around, but I have to get it at least to the point where it's not, high ridges, so then I can go back and fill it again. What I'll probably do, we'll probably stop here because this is kind of boring for you guys to watch as it is for me to do it. And then sort of when we get to the process, when it's a little bit almost complete, we'll pick the video back up again. So one of the things I thought of, well, I haven't made that much progress, is when you epoxy a boat, there's a sort of a waxy white layer that's called blush. And what you really should be doing to save yourself a little time and energy, and this is one of those things that I tend to be lazy about, is you should take soap and water and just sort of wipe the boat down quick, and you'll get away most of that blush. You definitely need to do that before you put any additional layers of epoxy on it, because the blush will get in the way. But what happens if you don't do that, it clogs up the sandpaper. So what I'll tend to do is I'm trying to go through this a little bit quick, is as the sandpaper get blocked up, I get just a regular sort of painter's wire brush, and then I knock it off until I get most of it off, because that'll slow me down. And then once I get that all knocked off, and we got nice clean sandpaper, you'll be able to use the sandpaper a lot longer. This is actually, I didn't mention this before, but this is fairly heavy grit. This was in my drawer for years, so I believe this is actually a 40 grit, which is probably more than what most people would do. But again, I'm not doing a lot of sanding. I'm just knocking down the high sides to get it ready for the next coat. So that's why I'm just going to the 40. When I build into, actually smoothing this boat out, I'll probably start at about 100 and work my way all the way up to like 220, something like that, before I would even think about putting a primer coat on top of this boat. But we'll keep going on the sanding. So we started out with the hand sanding, and clearly we haven't done the whole boat yet, but what I was thinking of showing you, I'm going to vacuum off some of the dust here, and what I want to talk about doing is, I haven't done this before, but one of the hardest things to do is when you're in the corners like this, I don't know if you can see the light there, when you're in the corners like this, you got the epoxy sort of builds up, which is good, you want to have that, it builds up in the corner. But you do want to get it smooth. You don't want to have it lumped in there. And you can do it by hand, but it's labor intensive. But I do have this detailed sander, which I haven't used too much. But you can see this sander it's a Porter cable and has a bunch of sort of nice profiles to it. It gives you that nice round edge. And so I'm going to look at these profiles and sort of figure out which one matches the best. We'll go with this one here so you can sort of see how that goes in. So I don't know if you can see on that camera angle there, but basically we're just trying to fill that in there and trying to see if I can get the right one. I got all different shapes and sizes to be able to make this guy work. The one that's actually on the sheet machine, I'm a little bit worried about. That one looks a little bit tight to me. And I don't want to cut into it, so let's pull that off. We're going to put this on the rounder one. We'll give it a shot here. We'll see which one works the best. Some of the paper has a little bit of sticky back to it, and some of it doesn't. You don't necessarily need the sticky back,
because it has a little wedge in the machine. So this is an older machine. I bet you this one's probably, I don't even know if they sell these anymore like this. This machine's probably 20 years old. But it, you know, like anything with Porter cable, it does a pretty good job, lasts a while. So we're gonna just try to squish that in there. And then we'll plug this thing in and see how it goes. Having a little tough time here getting it back into the holder with the new piece, so. All right, that'll have to be good for now. So let me get an extension cord set up. Get one right here, all ready to go. So I've got my extension cords together here. And I didn't want to waste your time that you guys watch me hook extension cords up. So what I'm going to do, before we use this sanding tool, I'm going to get my shop vac and just vacuum some of this up out of here. Okay, now I'm going to go back in with the detail sander, and just again, I don't want to take off all of the epoxy. It's good to have that chamfer that's built up in there, but I want to be able to smooth it out so it looks consistent and smooth when we apply some paint on this sucker. So we'll put this on here, assuming that it should be plugged in and working. There we go. A little tap will help. So it looks like this one actually is a little bit too wide. You see how I'm getting it up on the sides and not in the actual groove? So I'm going to go back to that other sanding tool that I had before. Let's see where it is. Here it is. This one's a little bit tighter. So I'm going to go back and use this one because I think, let's see which one. Yeah, it's this one right here. So I think that will actually fit in the groove a little bit better because I don't like how that was doing that. It's always got to be careful. Like, I'm always one to go through these things as fast as I possibly can, and I end up, you know, putting myself into trouble because then I end up taking off more material than I actually want to take off. So I'm going to try to slow myself down a little bit and do this the first time. So here we go. I got a little bit deeper into the groove here, so we're going to turn this back on. That worked pretty good. That's exactly what I wanted to do, but it obviously fell out of the sander. So this thing, I can tell why they use different tools now, because this thing, to get it going, again, I haven't used this thing in over 20 years, so you know, fell out on me there. But we're just going to try to go down here until we get that whole edge there consistent with a smooth bead on there. So let's see if I can do this finally for the right time. As I'm doing this, one of the things that I wanted to point out, and I'm really guilty of this, but you often, when you're using a sander, you want to push down hard because you feel like the more force that you have, the quicker it's going to go for you. But what that actually ends up doing is it ends up slowing down the machine, and it slows down the sanding process, and you also get an uneven sand. So really what you got to try to force yourself to do with these machines or any power sander is let the sandpaper do the work, and you'll find that over time it'll go a little bit faster than you actually think it is, because you just need that sucker to move back and forth and scrape it. The pressure of pushing it does not help you any. One of the last things I wanted to show you on this episode, and I won't put you all through the pain of doing the final sanding, is I wanted to talk a little bit about the buildup of the stern and how I overlap the fiberglass. And one of the things that you'll see me probably not do is not do too many layers of epoxy on the bottom of this boat, because I think I already have, I've got one layer of epoxy without the cloth on it. I have the layer with the cloth on it, and then I have 3 layers over that. So we're building on, you know, 6 layers now. So I think the bottom is pretty good. It's the side that needs those additional layers. But I also wanted to show you what I've done is the back is, again, it's actually deceiving. There's a whole structure inside this boat that is an engine well, and that's where the boat gets the strength from the designer. So the bottom is actually a 1/2-inch plywood, and then the center of it has built up solid stock to give you about 1 inch thickness. So you've got the 1/2-inch plywood, then I've got a thicker layer of cloth over that, and what I've tried to do is overlap it so that we go in. So the only epoxying I'm going to be doing to the bottom is to feather out this overlap joint, and then I'll do a little bit more on some of the thinner spots that I have. Now, I talked a little bit more about some of these air bubbles that I had and had trouble with it. I've spent a lot of time, you guys haven't seen of me digging those bubbles out. I was very frustrated by the whole thing. So I've gotten it to the point where it's not perfect, but it's about where as far as I can take it. And my thought process here is that I think it's pretty good. I'm going to be epoxying the bottom and potentially putting a bottom coat on it as well. For sort of when it's sitting in the water for longer than a couple of weeks, which it may or may not be. But anyway, as I'll always watch the boat, and since I built it from scratch, I feel pretty comfortable in the sense that if I see a bubble pop in the epoxy after I've been using it for a little bit, in the water for a few years, I'll just dig that out and refill it again. So it's probably not the best way to do it, but when it comes to sort of my patience with doing this whole thing, it's sort of I've sort of been okay and comfortable with the fact that it's now not going to be absolutely perfect, and I think I just have to be okay with that. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit and sure to give you a close-up detail of how I overlap the joints and everything like that to give you an idea of that. The next time you see the video, this will be all sanded. Again, not a thorough, like ready for paint job sanded, but the high sides removed so that I can put another level of coat of epoxy on it. And what I'll do is I'll get this all sanded behind the scenes, and then when I come back here, you'll see it sanded, vacuumed off, and ready for the epoxy. And I'll actually show you how my process is with the epoxy. I also have to wait for the weather to warm up here a little bit in New Hampshire. So hopefully we'll get a 45, 50 degree day, because I found through experience you can't do it any more than that. So I had a lot of fun. Definitely gonna hope to continue to do this. I hope you guys enjoy this. I will put together a collection of all of the photographs and everything that we have up until this process so that everybody can get caught up to speed. But I'm having fun, and I hope we can keep doing this in the future. I'll talk to you in a bit.